Hey guys, new video. For this, I just wanted to talk about something, and that is gaming pet peeves. Basically, like, what bothers you in video games when you're playing a video game? Is there something that kind of is in different video games that as soon as you hit this section or this part of the game, it just pisses you off? I don't know. I just wanted to kind of give some examples of some things that just really bug me in video games, and I'd like to actually get your guys' input too in the comments or a video response or something. Those pet peeves in gaming, because I'm sure a lot of people have different pet peeves. Something I might not like in games, someone else could love, and vice versa. So there's just a few things here I want to mention. First off, insane random encounter rates, and I think a lot of you know I hate this. And I've been playing some RPGs lately that just have really high encounter rates. Most notably, Final Fantasy V. Not too long ago, I played, and just I don't know, the encounter rate in that game just really bothered me. I don't know why I hate really high encounter rates so much. I don't really hate the idea of random encounters. I mean, I'm not totally opposed against them. I can get by. Like Final Fantasy VII, that game had random encounters, and I enjoyed it. It didn't bother me. But with games when they're so high, it kind of ruins exploration for me. And I'm a sucker for exploration in RPGs, in games in general. And if there's a random encounter rate that's ridiculously high, and there's multiple routes to go in a dungeon, right? If there's treasure at the end of one hallway, I'll just want to get through this dungeon as quick as possible because I'm sick of fighting. I'm sick of being thrown into a battle every second when I'm just trying to get to this one item or I'm trying to do a puzzle. It's just infuriating, and it just makes me want to get through the dungeon as quick as possible, especially when the game is tough. It's even worse when every enemy has a chance of killing you. It just gets absolutely brutal, and it's one of those things. Whenever I play an RPG and the encounter rate is super high, it bothers me. It really gets me angry. Another pet peeve: unskippable scenes. I think a lot of people hate this. It's just I don't know. It's one of those things that cutscenes, they've got to be able to be skipped. I mean, it's like game design 101. I'm sorry. And the worst instance of this is if you're fighting a really tough boss, like a final boss, and it's hard as shit, and you're dying over and over again, but there's a massive 20-30 minute cutscene before it, and every time you die, you have to go through that over and over and over again. And this can extend to tons of dialogue before hard bosses. Just unskippable dialogue, unskippable bosses. I mean, for the first time playing the game, that's fine, but eventually you're going to want to skip this stuff, and that's just one of those things that still finds its way into a lot of games, and it pisses me off. Another pet peeve, this one really kind of bothers me. Terrible checkpoints, long-ass checkpoints, where you're playing for hours without a save point, and then you'll die, and then you have to replay hours. People have jobs. They don't have. They can't spend millions of hours. Not millions. That's an exaggeration. But they can't spend tons of hours playing one video game and going through these long sections. Some people can, but most people can't. So why games that still have crazy long checkpoints? It's beyond me. A couple of examples. I remember Metroid Prime 2. I really hated that game, and that's going to show up later too in this list of pet peeves, because that game has a bunch of my pet peeves all in one game. But the checkpoints in that game were just they were insane, and the fact that it had other shit in that game that just really pissed me off was just crazy. Demon Souls. As much as I love Demon Souls, I gotta admit the checkpoints in that game, you had to do entire 30-minute to hour long levels, and then you'd get to a boss at the end, and there were no checkpoints. Sometimes you'd get some shortcuts. Some of the levels had shortcuts, but Shrine of Storms, World 4-2, for anybody that knows Demon Souls, that level is massive, and there's not a single shortcut, and a boss right at the end of it, and it's a really annoying level too. Yeah, as much as I love Demon Souls, it suffers from that terrible checkpoints. Dark Souls kind of fixed that with the bonfire system. Another pet peeve: respawning enemies. God, I hate this so much. Not I don't mean if you're clearing out a room of enemies and you move to the next room and you go back and they're there again, like in an RPG, so you can grind out enemies. That's not so bad. It's infinitely respawning enemies, and I think this is worst in shooters. Where enemies are just spawning out of nowhere, monster closets as they're called. Doom, the original Doom. I love Doom, but on Nightmare mode, I'm sorry, that game, I just can't handle it. It's just too much. It's too annoying. With enemies just, as soon as you kill them, like seconds after, they just spawn back in. But I know, that shit just really bothers me because, again, it ruins exploration. I'm trying to, explore these environments and take my time, and I can't because enemies are constantly being thrown at me. A lot of sections in modern shooters these days have these sections where you're going through an area and just enemies just come out of nowhere, from behind you, from around you. It just, I don't know, respawning enemies, really hate respawning enemies. Okay, this one, really, this one, trial and error game design. Something that is still in games, and I'm so fucking sick of it. I've got quite a few examples too, even from games that I really love. Trial and error design, that can be in all sorts of games where you have to keep trying different things to progress, and it's, a lot of times you might die trying out these different things, and you're never really quite sure what the game's telling you or how you're supposed to do things. Basically, almost every shooter on the hardest difficulty I find is trial and error game design, in the sense that a lot of shooters, Call of Duty in particular, on the hardest difficulty, it's all about knowing where the enemies are, where they're going to be ahead of time, so you can dispose of them quick, because, a few bullets will put you down. And I went through veteran mode on, like, Call of Duty 4, some of the other Call of Duties as well, and the Halo games on Legendary are the same thing. And it's tedious. It is fucking tedious, and I never play shooters on hard mode anymore because I know that's always going to be the case. It's just, it's just knowing where these enemies are in the level and knowing it to a T and dying every time you don't know the exact location an enemy's going to be. Halo 2 on Legendary was horrible for this, with the jackals and their like snipers that as soon as you got into view, boom, you're dead. It was ridiculous. Donkey Kong Country Returns has trial and error game design in the rocket barrel levels and the minecart levels. If you don't know the layouts of these levels beforehand, you're going to die like countless times. It is so unfair, and it's that kind of difficulty that I just despise because it feels cheap. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel like a genuine challenge, and that was one of my main issues with Donkey Kong Country Returns. Persona 4, as much as I love this game, to get the true ending, you have to go through a bunch of dialogue options, very specific ones, and if you get the wrong option, you get a bad ending. So you have to reload your save and do it all over again. It's by far the worst part in the game, and it kind of sours it a bit. Yeah, trial and error game design, just not into that. Time limits. Might be one of my biggest gaming pet peeves, time limits, and this is in so many games even now. Again, it goes back to the exploration. If I'm on a time limit, it makes me feel like I'm being rushed, and I gotta rush, and I can't stand that. It's just not me. I like to explore these environments in these games and, take my time, and to throw a time limit at me is just, it's annoying. I find it very annoying. The Zelda games constantly throw this at you. As much as I love the Zelda games, there's a certain Zelda game I'm going to talk about soon here. Jet Grind Radio. Jet Set Radio Future on the Xbox is one of my favorite games of all time. Like, that game was awesome. Jet Grind Radio I couldn't stand because every level was timed. I couldn't enjoy that. Where Jet Set Radio Future, they got rid of the time limit, and that game was like a million times better to me. But yeah, time limits I just have never been a fan of. Escort missions. I think everyone hates these, and yet they're still in games. I still find them. The Zelda series, again. A lot of the Zelda games have escort missions. Dead Rising, as much as I love Dead Rising, that series has escort missions, and the AI on those escorts, like, this is the problem with escort missions. The AI is always so goddamn terrible. Silent Hill 4, the entire second half of that game is just a massive escort mission, and it almost ruins the game for me. Perfect Dark, there's a few escort missions in that. It's really annoying having to take care of this character that can't do shit, and they're just, have terrible AI. Really, escort missions, man. And finally, this last pet peeve is kind of a preference thing, because I'm sure a lot of you know how much I hate stealth, and this is stealth elements put into games that aren't stealth games. If Metal Gear Solid, whatever, because that's a stealth game. I'm talking Zelda games that keep doing this, and they're always the worst part of the games for me. The biggest example, though, is Majora's Mask, the Pirate's Fortress. Like, fuck that place, man. Every time I play that game, and I love Majora's Mask, I always, like, get to that part, and I'm like, and all of a sudden I don't feel like playing the rest of the game, because that part just is such a drag. It is so tedious, so frustrating. But the worst is the Temple of the Ocean King in Phantom Hourglass, and I've talked about this game before in my Zelda series review. It combines the stealth pet peeve, the escort pet peeve. Actually, the escorts I think are in other spots of that game, but they're still in that game, and the time limit. It's like stealth, time limit, and trial and error actually as well. And respawning enemies, basically, all combined into one. Like, that Temple of the Ocean King is like almost every one of my pet peeves thrown into one dungeon. The terrible checkpoints as well are in that. Like, you can definitely tell why I really did not care for that game. Assassin's Creed has stealth missions, which actually I really liked the first two Assassin's Creed games, but the third one, Brotherhood, I dropped it purely because of the stealth missions, because it's that Splinter Cell thing, right, where you got to know the patrols, right? And as soon as you're seen in this Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, these missions, it's over, game over. You got to go back 30 minutes to your last checkpoint, and it's just like, it just really, really bothers me. But yeah, that's it, guys. Those were my big pet peeves in games. I thought it'd be fun to just share what just grinds my gears in terms of video games. But I want to know what your biggest pet peeves are. What are things in video games that drive you nuts? Do any of these things bother you? But that'll be it, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.